But yeah, thank you again so much for
Of
coming
course.
on. I really, really appreciate it. I know I've been catching you on Science's streams many, many times, including
It's
last
so good to
night.
actually like meet you in person. So
Yes.
fun.
So good
I
to have you
love.
here. And
I love the ears. They're super
oh,
cute.
thank you. We do like cats a lot here.
We love a cat. What's not to like?
Love them all. For anybody
We do.
who might not know you or maybe
Oh, yeah.
wasn't in our raid last night, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it's a good place to start. My name is Helen. I use she, her pronouns. I work at Fred Hutch Cancer Center. Prior to working at Fred Hutch Cancer Center, my first sort of, real, big girl job was at the Element Supercell Science. And that is a local research institution here in Seattle, Washington. And I was studying a process called EMT, the epithelial to mesenchymal transition, which I'm sure everyone's super familiar with because it's, really chill and not at all way too wordy. Essentially, EMT, the epithelial to mesenchymal transition, is the process by which cells go from like their static, well-defined state, like here I am, I'm a skin cell, I love being a skin cell, I'm so happy, to this mobile, diverse, versatile cell that can move throughout the body and become another cell type. And it's really important in cancer and also in embryogenesis, right? Because when a baby is forming, originally it's like one cell, and so it's got to become other cells, and those cells have to go to the right places in the body. So it's this like fundamental process. Very cool. I studied that for a few years. But then I wanted to like talk to people and not just my cells. And so I went to grad school on the East Coast to study genetic counseling. Are you familiar with genetic counseling?
I've never sought it out, and neither have my parents. Both of them have had cancer diagnoses, ovarian and prostate cancer. So we're gonna get into some of that today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've never actually done it myself, and I've always wondered if like maybe it would be worth doing, considering my own like family history.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we can talk about that. Also, are your parents both doing okay? How are they doing?
No, my mom passed away. We are coming up on her 12-year anniversary of when she passed. It was very common with ovarian cancer. It was just diagnosed super, super late. So we miss her a lot. My dad got his diagnosis for prostate cancer late last year. He had his surgery earlier this year, and he is doing amazingly. He's back on his bicycle. He's more in shape than I am.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad to hear your dad's doing well. I'm so sorry for your loss. Yeah, ovarian cancer is a tough one. Yeah. Also, dads being more in shape than us, humbling. My father's also more in shape than me. Like when we go hiking, he's like, I can barely keep up with you. And I'm like, finally, you're in your fucking mid-60s. Like it's really rude actually that I'm finally the same level of in shape as you. Like it's actually pretty insulting. Me in my prime, my father literally like retirement age, finally hiking at the same level.
Such a mood.
Ugh, I feel that. Yeah. Well, genetic counseling, as you've kind of alluded to, understanding it has to do with genetics, family history. Essentially, genetic counseling is a form of healthcare genetics where we meet with folks who have a family history or a personal history that suggests there might be something going on in their genes that's a little different than typical. Sometimes that's associated with an increased cancer risk. Sometimes it's associated with other health concerns. And we basically just talk with these folks, help figure out what might be going on, do some genetic testing, and then use that information to empower them to make decisions that feel right for themselves and their families. So super cool. Studied that on the East Coast. But then my family was all still back here in Seattle. And they were like, if you don't move home, we're going to lose it. And I was like, well, it's a bit dramatic. So I looked for jobs in the area, and I found this job as a science communicator. So essentially, it's my job to come here, learn about all of the science happening at Fred Hutch. We have over 240 different labs, and sort of following all of their different work, and then write about it, yap about it, share with our community. Sort of our big thing is science not shared is science not learned. So just getting it out to incredible folks like you and your community. Yeah. So that's me.
Yeah. Well, you're awesome. And I was I was teasing to my my Splatoon team earlier today because I took a little gander. For those of you who don't know, Helen did provide a little slideshow that we're gonna go through in a bit.
Oh yeah.
And I was just like, all right, team, there's some Splatoon graphics in here.
I always try to like customize them, but it was so funny because I've never played Splatoon because I'm a dummy when it comes to games and I'm terrible at them. And I was literally like, which characters seem like good characters? I was like, I'm like, you should have, my search history is hilarious before I go on streams. So I'm like, Splatoon, Splatoon game. Splatoon 2 different from Splatoon 3? Good characters in Splatoon. What is Dooley class? Dooley class a person? Dooley class a weapon? Like, it's literally just me being like, I don't know. Her bio says she likes this. I don't know what that is. No, it's so funny. It's an adorable game. I didn't realize how cute it was. It's adorable.
It is, and it is pretty much the only like shooter, which I put in quotes because there's so many weapon classes that are not like pew pew guns. There's tons of other things. It's very like paint themed, very like art themed, and also very like ocean and like, you know, nautical theming. Yeah. So
and how long have you been playing? How long have you been streaming?
I've been playing it long before I was streaming because I started playing it the day one of Splatoon 1 came out on the Wii U. And I was working as a journalist at E3 the day it got announced as like a brand new surprise drop from Nintendo. Like, hey, we're making this new game series. And so I've been playing it ever since and streaming it since like 2019 or so.
So are you like one of the best in the world? Or are you like good?
My team, we're considered like low level competitive. I've fought against people who are like the best players in the West, and they like wipe the floor with me. But I'm like, I always laugh and I'm like, I'm at that level where I'm very impressive to people who don't play competitively. And then like, I know so many people who are better than I am.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely feel that. I feel like that's how I feel with cooking. Like my friends that don't cook are like, "You're such a good cook," and I'm like, "Oh, besties, I'm actually aggressive. Like, I'm actually aggressively mid. Yeah. Like you don't understand."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. I'm excited to see if the characters I picked are good characters.
Yeah, chat will be very, very excited to see.
So
I can bring that up now. Let me just.
Yeah, as you might have seen last night on the stream, Science and I were joking about my emotional support slides because that is like a thing in science communication. We're always like, don't rely on your slides. You don't need to have slides. Don't rely on them. And then every single scientist ever is like, so here's the thing. I have a slide deck. I have my emotional support slides.
Gotta have them.
Gotta have them. Also, I love seeing your chat, Shantara. That's so fun. I love that you guys just like, what I love about these communities, because I'm also new to Twitch, is like how y'all just find each other and then become like best friends. It's like a special kind of bond.
It is. Yeah, no, Shantara like saw me on like, I think Twitter before finding me on Twitch because she happened to see one of my cosplays because I also cosplay a fair amount, and then she was like, "Oh yeah, I like saw your such and such cosplay online one day," and I was like, "What? You did?"
Oh, that's so funny. You're like, that's a different part of my world. What are you talking about? That's my other life.
So I had no idea.
That's so funny. It's kind of like during grad school, one of my jobs in grad school, I was a TA and I also worked in an ice cream shop. Shout out Spotty Dog Ice Cream Co. in Richmond, Virginia. Cutest ice cream shop in the entire world.
Oh, that's so cool.
Dude, it's so fun. It was so great. The owners are like the best, like cutest, sweetest couple in the entire world. And everyone who works there is in grad school, at least when I was there. It's like the vibes, phenomenal. We're always like playing Chapel Roan. Like it was just like the vibes.
Yes.
So good. And when we were working there, where was I going with this? When we were working there, Richmond is like a pretty small town in Virginia.
My sister's in Richmond.
Oh my gosh, love.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you know, are you in Virginia?
No, I'm up in New York. I'm up in New York City.
Okay. Very cool. Ooh, big city girl. Okay, very cool. Well, in Richmond, you should tell her to go to Spotty Dog because it's
I will.
stunning.
I'll ask her if she knows it.
It's so good. But I would wear my like work t-shirt and then like go get a prescription or like run errands or like go to campus to study in the library. And people would be like, "Oh my God, are you Helen from Spotty Dog?" And I'd be like, "This town is too small. Like this is unhinged. I'm not even like an important person. I just work there." Like, no, it was so funny. It was so funny.
Oh, that's so great. But it's so good to have you here,
Yes.
Helen. We chatted a little bit about you, but could you tell us a little bit more about Fred Hutch for anybody who has somehow like not been around for me chatting about Fred Hutch for the past week, or any other previous charity campaign?
Yeah. Well, actually, I can't see your screen. I can see you, but I can't see your screen. Are you showing the slideshow right now?
I am.
Oh, love. Okay, well, if you go to the second slide,
Yeah.
what we'll sort of yap about today is sort of like, who is Fred Hutch? We'll go over some ovarian cancer basics, talk about ovarian cancer genetics, because I love genetics. Talk about sort of like some practical take homes, like what can we do regarding our cancer risk? And then I always put Q&A on there, but like straight up, just like ask questions as we go. Like that's ridiculous. It's a conversation. I think the hold your questions to the end thing is for strictly deeply professional meetings and generally hate it. So it's like, please no. That's just on there as an open invitation throughout. It's not linear. All right, so if you go to the next slide, I just kind of wanted to call out what you've already referenced, which is that cancer is personal. Cancer is a very personal thing. And I think about that in multiple ways. One way is that it's touched so many of us, both your parents. My mom had breast cancer. I'm very lucky that she's doing well today.
That's awesome.
But it's just a thing that is ubiquitous. It's in the fabric of our society because it is one of the most common human diseases. About 1 in 3 people over the course of their lifetime in the United States will have cancer. And it's also personal in the sense that cancer is one of the few diseases that starts within our body. It's not something happening to us. It's our own cells misbehaving and creating a disease. So it's personal in the sense that it's us. And so sort of to talk a little bit about how I got into cancer, if you go to the next slide, this is me as a child.
Adorable.
I was a little freak for animals. And as you know, if you were an animal kid or if anyone is an animal kid, what are you going to be when you grow up? Like, what are you going to be?
Oh, man. Yeah. I wanted to be a veterinarian until I learned how much science was involved.
We all wanted to be a veterinarian. Literally all of us. We were all like, I've seen a horse. I'd like to be a vet. Then I'm at Y camp. And so most of my life, I was like, I'm going to be a vet. I had that bowl cut way too long. Jackie,
we all had that haircut.
I had that bowl cut so long that I remember when I was in karate class at the YMCA, I remember someone went, are you a boy or a girl? And luckily my gender identity was secure because I was like, pretty sure I'm a girl, but I do see this haircut.
Yeah, that was so me, but definitely not knowing what my gender was at the time.
It's very confusing. I think about that all the time. I was like, that could have been such a stressful question.
Yeah.
Like being asked you to crush on, very stressful. It's like, oh, I don't know. What's that supposed to feel like? Yeah. Anyways, so I studied, loved animals, thought I wanted to be a vet. So I went to grad school went to undergrad, studied cell molecular biology. And I did a lot of volunteer work in medically adjacent spaces, a lot of different social networking, not social networking, social volunteering things. I've never networked in my life. I was volunteering at the food bank and stuff. It's the opposite of networking. And so I was doing all of that. And I was on this path to be a vet, doing the pre-med, all that stuff. But then if you go to the next slide, as I mentioned, my mom, who I love dearly, who is adorable in this picture.
So
I'm very lucky he's doing well. Yeah, she's the cutest person in the world. She's 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, soaking wet. If I stand in front of her, she disappears. She's non-existent. She's a little wisp of a thing.
Oh my gosh.
And when I was in school, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was one of those things where it was really hard to diagnose and really hard to find. And so it ended up being really difficult to treat, which kind of was surprising at first. So we did chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, all of the things, the whole gamut. And we're very, very lucky that she's alive and well today. But it really shifted my focus. I was already in science. I was already in all these different science classes, really loving genetics. But I kind of realized oh shit, this can't be the best we can do with cancer treatment. I think when you hear about it and you read about it, you just think about, oh, we have all these treatments, most people live. But then we have cases where, your mother, people do pass from their disease. We have cases like parents where they go through a really, really hard time and it's not easy. And we have a lot of people, where their quality of life is never as good as it was prior to having cancer.
Yeah, that is a good point, because a lot of it is also living with cancer and how much it impacts your life, even both while you're
Yeah.
doing, like chemotherapy appointments or like radiation.
Yes.
Obviously, it's a huge toll on the body, but it's also like a huge logistical nightmare.
Yes. And it's expensive. It's expensive. Like it's all of the things. It's financially expensive, emotionally expensive,
Hmm.
temporally expensive because it's your time. You can't work if you don't have support. That's even harder.
Hmm.
And it's one of those things that I think I, like so many of us, like every single person here at Fred Hutch, was like, there has to be room for improvement. This cannot be the best we can do. It's 2025. Let's go. Like
Hmm.
we have to be able to improve. And I mentioned everyone here at Fred Hutch. And if you go to the next slide, that's because everyone here at Fred Hutch is really here because we believe in our mission. And that mission was started in 1975 by Bill Hutchinson. So Bill Hutchinson is the gentleman on the right. He's the one in the suit. And he was an oncologist practicing in Seattle, Washington. An oncologist is just a cancer specialist. And he was specifically studying, different kinds of cancer and cancer treatments when his brother, Bill, who's on the right in the Cincinnati Reds, Chicago Bears, not a sports girl, in the Cincinnati Reds cap, when his brother came for a visit and they noticed sort of a lump in his throat and they ended up diagnosing Fred with cancer. They think maybe it was originally lung cancer that metastasized, but regardless of what the primary cancer was, by the time Bill diagnosed his brother with cancer, it was pretty far progressed. And unfortunately, Bill had to be the one not only to diagnose his brother, but the one to treat his brother and be by his brother's side when his brother passed from his disease. And Fred wasn't even 50 by the time he passed. He was a young man.
That is young.
It is young. And so Bill sort of had the same feeling that you had, that I had, that every person who works here has had, where they go, this cannot be the best we can do. And I think so often in science, we ask ourselves, what happens if we fail? We want to practice caution. We want to be, we want to be thoughtful. We want to be slow. But I think the moments that we see really great breakthroughs are when people like Bill ask, what happens if we don't? What happens if we don't fail? What happens if we succeed? And so if you go to the next slide, you'll see the first building that was built. So in 1975, we opened our doors. Bill founded the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in honor of his brother. And this was a very unique institution in that it wasn't a hospital just for patient care. It was a research center. Because Bill didn't want to just provide the same patient care that had been, that had been the standard of care. He wanted to challenge that standard of care. He wanted to find ways to do things better. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that over the last 50 years, we have done remarkable things at Fred Hutch. We've won 3 Nobel Prizes, 4 if you count David Baker's, who's one of our partners at UW. But the thing is, we always lead with that because it's flashy and it's easy to say, oh, Nobel Prizes, 4 in 50 years is crazy. But the thing is it's not about the prizes, the awards. The important thing is the countless lives that have been changed by this work. Fred Hutch has grown from a few dozen people who were studying primarily hematologic or blood-based cancers to a national, an NCI designated, National Cancer Institute designated, comprehensive cancer center with 7 different research divisions, over 240 different labs, over 6,100 different faculty or different employees, all committed to tackling cancer and infectious disease in all these different ways. I mean, an example of that, because I like to give like a concrete example. In 1975, one of the first things that Bill and his team wanted to tackle was the bone marrow transplant. Have you heard of the bone marrow transplant before?
Yeah, I have. That's a pretty serious deal.
Okay, yes. Okay, tell us about it.
I don't know like details about it, but I do know it is frequently comes up in like medical dramas where it's like, oh, a bone marrow transplant. Oh, that's a big deal.
Yes. Yeah, Grey's Anatomy, they're always like, bone marrow transplant, bone marrow. Yeah. Yeah. So the reason that you're seeing about that on Grey's Anatomy and medical dramas is because of Fred Hutch. The bone marrow transplant was actually pioneered and mastered at Fred Hutch. And that's what earned us the first Nobel Prize in 1990, which is pretty crazy to think that before the 80s, we didn't even have bone marrow transplant. What that is, for folks who aren't familiar, is essentially if you have blood cancer, your doctors want to get rid of your cancer. Amazing. And we know that the blood cells come from the bone marrow. And so what you do is you basically use radiation, now sometimes other forms as well of different kinds of treatments, to remove the bone marrow, to kill all of the bone marrow cells in the person who's sick. And the hope is that you're going to kill all of the cancer cells, and you're also going to kill all the cells that would make the cancer cells. But then this person has no bone marrow, so you need to replace it. And so we replace that bone marrow with bone marrow from a donor, or now we can do something called a hematopoietic stem cell transplant, where sometimes we can actually harvest healthy stem cells from the person themselves and then reimplant those back into the person. And with the advent of BMT, bone marrow transplant, there were sort of two beautiful things that happened. One is that leukemia, which at the time was considered essentially fatal, over 90% of all people diagnosed with leukemia at that time died from their disease, and flipped that. Nowadays, over 90% of people with leukemia survive, live, and have a cure, because bone marrow transplant is a cure, not a treatment. If it is successful, it is a cure, which is incredible. And so that's the first beautiful thing. And the second beautiful thing is that when we did those bone marrow transplants, they noticed that not only was the bone marrow replacing all of the cells that we wiped out, but that actually the immune cells in that donated bone marrow, the white blood cells, the immune cells, they were fighting any lingering cancer cells that hadn't been wiped out. So the donated immune cells were fighting the remaining cancer cells in the host, because the host's cancer cells had evolved to escape the immune system in the host, but they hadn't evolved to escape the donor immune cells. And before then, we hadn't known that your body was able to fight cancer itself. We didn't know that your immune system could do that. We thought your immune system was only for like bacteria and viruses and stuff. We didn't know that it was for cancer. And so that set off the entire field of immunotherapy, which has revolutionized cancer care. So that's just like one example of the amazing things that have been happening at Fred Hutch and are continuing to happen in 2025 because of support from folks like you. We remain a nonprofit, have been a nonprofit, and it's just really, really exciting that so many people in the community nationwide, I mean, you're in New York. It's incredible how many people are driven and motivated in the same way that Bill was, in the same way that we all are. Like, it's really exciting. Yeah, so that's Fred Hutch.
Yeah, Fred Hutch. A few years ago, when I was, I guess it's more than a few years ago, when I was getting like my HPV shots, a reminder to chat, if you haven't talked to your doctor about HPV vaccine and you haven't gotten it yet, you should have a conversation with your doctor about that. And I remember then like later when I happened to start doing stuff for Fred Hutch and I was reading up on some of the things that Fred Hutch had been involved in, I was like, oh, hey, HPV vaccine.
Yes. For folks who don't know, the HPV vaccine, HPV stands for, this is so funny, by the way. I literally sent my friends, so my friends and I send each other voice memos and we call them podcasts. And I literally today, my friend sent a voice memo like yesterday and she was like, I've never gotten my HPV vaccine. I don't know. Are they important? And so today she got an unrequested, unsolicited 9-minute podcast about HPV.
Good.
But for folks who don't know, HPV stands for human papillomavirus. It's a very, very common virus. Most people have some strain of the virus by the time you're an adult. But we know that there are some strains of HPV, some strains of this virus, that are associated with a variety of cancers, including cervical, head and neck, rectal. And so we recommend that people get vaccinated against HPV, preferably before having sex, because it's usually sexually transmitted. And that way you could just prevent the risk of having a cancer associated with this infection. So it's a great vaccine. Typically, you get 3 doses when you're in adolescence. We're currently exploring if it's also really helpful to have as an adult, and if there's a way to reduce from 3 down to 1 doses. So we're still doing ongoing research on that, but it is important to get your vaccines, not only to stay healthy from the things they're targeting, but to help protect yourself from cancer and other associated conditions.
Yeah.
Thanks for that intro. Oh, and the HPV vaccine, after that basic info, was designed here at Fred Hutch by Dr. Denise Galloway.
Yeah, so awesome.
Cool. Yeah, I didn't even know that until I started working here. Someone's like, dude, that was designed here. I was like, here? Here? So cool. Yeah.
So neat.
I'm actually going to pop Denise Galloway's info in the chat right now because I think that she is so cool. And her daughter also works at Fred Hutch and is also a scientist here. And her partner was also a scientist here, which is super
so cool.
Exciting. Yeah, family legacy. We love to see it.
You got there a little bit before I did. I was going to permit you. You're good now.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Okay, let's do it again.
You're good.
Oh, Jackie's like, that was deleted.
There you go.
All right. Any questions about Fred Hutch before we move on to some ovarian cancer stuff?
I'm good. I've seen nothing from chat right now. I know Shawnee earlier said that her grandmother got a bone marrow transplant when she was struggling with blood cancer. So it's like, yeah, I feel like most people here, even if you don't have somebody in your immediate family who's gone through cancer, you generally know somebody who does have family who's gone through it. So like I've like met so many people who are like, oh yeah, like my like parents or grandparents had cancer, or like a friend of mine has cancer. I've had the past couple of years, I've known a lot of people within my own friend group, even like within like my age group of like young 30s, of getting diagnosed with certain cancers. Generally, this tends to be the ones that are like very easy to diagnose and also very easy to treat, thankfully. So that's all been very good. Yeah. They're all doing well. But I was just like, oh yeah, like I feel like we all know many somebodies.
And we're seeing a rise in cancer diagnoses in younger people, particularly colon cancer. And that's why you might have noticed that the recommended guidelines for when to get a colonoscopy, they've actually lowered the age to start at age 40 now, because we're seeing that increased incidence. And like you're saying too, we all know someone, and it's to the point where we kind of forget sometimes. My grandmother passed away from cancer before I was born, before any of us was born. She was very young. And it's the kind of thing that I don't even think about. You know, because it's just like, oh yeah, she just, I mean, probably because I never met her, but it's just like, oh yeah, she passed away from cancer. You know, you just forget because it's just such a common thing.
Yeah, for sure. And so today we're going to be mostly focusing on ovarian cancer topics. But if anybody does ever have a question not pertaining to ovarian cancer, please feel free to chime in on chat. If you have any like other questions about other cancers or any like other genetics related questions, feel free to chime in. We always figured that, you know, it's generally, it makes sense for somebody to come on here specifically to talk about ovarian cancer so that I can be nosy and get tons of, you know, like answers and ask questions and whatnot for something that affects, you know, my life personally. But I think also it is one of those cancers that is so deadly because we just a lot of people don't get diagnosed early. And if you don't know the signs, it is so easy to miss. My sister and I are constantly, like, every time we have abdominal pain, we, like, are half joking when we're like, oh, it's the cancer. It's the cancer. And then we're like, yeah, I'm feeling fine now. It wasn't cancer.
Yeah, you're like, do I need a Tums or something stronger? And I like that you mentioned that you like joke with your sister about it, because something I also want to acknowledge that I kind of like to acknowledge before doing topic like presentations about cancer, you know, whatever kind of cancer that is that I think for the most part, cancer is really, really sad and really, really scary. And so I feel like the best we should not let cancer do that to us when it doesn't have to. So when we talk about these things, when we talk about the education of these things, when we talk about the science, I think ideally it's great if that can be a moment for joy, you know, for laughter, for all of these things, for human connection. If we can make it a community building, sort of fun, exciting, look at this amazing science, look at the potential here, not to detract from the fact that it's also deeply sad and profoundly upsetting, but simply because we all contain multitudes and we can have fun and have a giggle and also be aware that like this is devastating. And that's why we're here supporting Fred Hutch, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always like to make sure that folks know that like the use of humor is not in any way to dismiss the sadness, but simply because life is really hard and we got to find some joy somewhere, you know?
Yeah. I think it's definitely really good when you can have those moments for space for dealing with the sadness, because like it is really, really sad. And like I'm really, really sorry to hear about your grandfather, Riri. Like I think a lot of us have really, really sad stories about cancer, and at least for a decent number of us, we also managed to get through by being able to sort of like make jokes about certain things and whatnot, and just sort of like my sister and I making jokes about how the symptoms for ovarian cancer are like the symptoms for super basic things that happen all the time.
The symptoms for ovarian cancer are so vague. They're like if you literally look at the American Cancer Society website or like NCCN guidelines, people are like, what are the signs and symptoms of ovarian cancer? And they're like, if you feel a little bloated, If
Yeah,
you
like, great.
pee a lot, it's like, if I pee a lot, I pee 8 times a day. What do you mean? Like, every single one of them could just apply to you. And so it's like so hard. And it's the same with like, and that's why you were saying ovarian cancer is one of the most deadly cancers, because even though it's more rare than breast cancer, it's a lot harder to diagnose, in part because we don't have really good technology. We have mammograms, we have colonoscopies, we have good technology for detecting those kinds of cancers, but we don't yet have any great technologies for detecting ovarian cancer. And because of where your ovaries are located in the body, and because the signs and symptoms are so vague, you don't usually catch it until much later, which is so tricky.
Yeah.
Talking about sort of the fact that it's one of the more deadly cancers, we should also talk about how common it is. So on one of these slides here, slide 10, I'm curious in the chat what people think. What do folks think is the average lifetime risk for developing ovarian cancer? So I'm referring to someone with ovaries here. So if you have ovaries, typically folks that are assigned female at birth have 2 ovaries. What's your lifetime risk for developing it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I will let chat chime in first. If what do you think it is? I know we've talked about how it is a part of the problem of like being able to, we haven't really developed great tests for it for early detection, because it is definitely one of the rarer ones out there.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with Holly from Fred Hutch, I think a couple years
Harris?
ago. Yeah, I had Holly Harris on here before.
I'm obsessed with Dr. Harris.
Yes.
I have such an intellectual crush on Dr. Harris.
Oh, she told us so many things. And yeah, she had been telling us, like, part of the hard part with the research is just that there's only so many people you can study.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so complicated. Like bodies are so complicated, and particularly women's bodies are so complicated when it comes to hormones, because they change so much. They change over the course of a month, over the course of an ovarian cycle, over the course of a pregnancy, following a pregnancy, through menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause. So it's tricky when we're trying to study things that are influenced by hormones when those hormones are not static.
Yeah.
All right, I'm seeing some guests in the chat.
Yeah, I see Harvey 2 Dent going with C.
All right. Okay, before we reveal, what do you think it is?
I'm going with C. That's my final answer.
Yeah. All right. Big reveal?
Yeah.
1 in 91.
It's wild where it's like that, about, around 1%.
About 1%. C for correct. Yeah, so if you go to the next slide, I'll just do a quick intro on what is ovarian cancer. For context, talking about how it's one of the more rare cancers, the lifetime risk for ovarian cancer, the average risk for a person to get ovarian cancer is about 1%. The average lifetime risk for someone with breasts to get breast cancer is about 13%. So that's just a comparison for you. Breast cancer is one of the more common cancers for women. Ovarian cancer is one of the slightly less common, but still, somewhat common. I think it's the 8th most common cancer. In terms of what that is, always like to go over this, because when I was, doing my clinical rotations on the East Coast, not everyone knows what ovaries are. So I always like to make sure we have the same baseline. So ovarian cancer is cancer of the ovaries. Ovaries are reproductive organs that are found in most women and folks assigned female at birth. Most women, again, folks assigned female at birth, are born with 2 ovaries on either side of the uterus. The uterus is an organ where a developing fetus or baby will grow. The ovaries are these little like egg-shaped, almond-sized structures on either side of that actually hold all of the eggs. And then they're connected to the uterus by these fallopian tubes. So you got ovaries make eggs, which travel through the fallopian tube into the uterus. And then at that point, the egg is hanging out. Either it gets fertilized and develops into a fetus, or it gets passed during a menstrual cycle. In addition to making eggs, your ovaries also make hormones. And
those pesky hormones.
Those pesky hormones. And that's why one of the things that I put on here a picture of Dr. Swisher. She's one of our scientists and care providers at Fred Hutch. And she has been one of the fundamental scientists to help us learn that actually 70% of ovarian cancers start in the fallopian tubes, not in the ovaries themselves. And the reason that's exciting, actually, can you guess why that might be exciting?
Is that somehow easier to deal with, like treat and whatnot, or test?
Okay. So I think you are a woman in STEM. Let's go. Fem in STEM.
I haven't
Let's
taken
go.
a science class since 11th grade.
Who needs it? Who needs that? Yeah. So the reason that's exciting is, one, anytime we learn more about biology, that's exciting because that's something to build on, you know? Mm. Two is that actually opens up opportunities for screening, because maybe one of the things that Dr. Swisher and her team are working on is essentially, I forget the exact term for it, but essentially it's the idea that we can flush fluid up through the uterus into the fallopian tubes and then drain that fluid back out, recollect that fluid, and then check to see what kinds of DNA ended up in that fluid. Ooh. Because as your cells naturally die, when your cells die, which is super natural for your cells to turn over, when they die, they like fall apart and they crumble apart. And their DNA also starts to fall apart and crumble apart. And we call that cell-free DNA because the DNA is no longer safely enclosed in a cell, it's just loose. And so the idea is that we can flush some fluid up in there, wash it out, collect it, look for all of the little pieces of cell-free DNA, and see if any of that DNA implies that there's cancer present. Is any of that DNA associated with cancer, which could give us a screening option? Because right now, like we've been talking about, ovarian cancer is really hard to screen for.
Yeah.
But if it starts in the fallopian tubes and we can screen for it, then we can diagnose it earlier. So that's one exciting thing. And the other exciting thing is that right now, one of the surgeries that some women choose to go through to reduce their risk of ovarian cancer is surgical removal of the ovaries.
I was just talking to my gynecologist about that a couple months ago.
Yes. Yes. So it's one of those things where, especially if you have like a personal or a genetic risk for ovarian cancer, some women choose to electively just remove these. Typically, it's recommended that folks do it when they're done making any family planning decisions and or around the ages of 35. Sometimes a little younger, sometimes a little older, depending on your personal family genetic history. Mm-hmm. And what this study suggests is that perhaps we could lower the risk of ovarian cancer by just removing the fallopian tubes and or the uterus and then leaving the ovaries. And the reason that would be helpful is that if you remove the ovaries, you go through menopause. You go through surgically induced menopause, as you and your gynecologist talked about.
And I was like, oh, that doesn't sound great. And she was like, yeah, you might not want to do that right now. And I was like, oh, yeah, not really.
No, because I remember one of my patients, we were talking about it and she was like, oh, I'll get it all out. I don't want kids. I'll get it all out. And I was like, I'm so glad to hear that you're open to discussing different options, but let's just like walk through exactly what that would look like. Because like people should do whatever they want, obviously. Yeah. It's your body, your choice. But I was like, so there is this whole menopause situation. She went, oh, that would happen? I was like, yeah, that would happen.
It makes sense. Like once my gynecologist explained it, I was like, oh, of course that would happen. It just like didn't even occur to me. I was like, yeah, can't you just like yeet those ovaries out? And like, I don't need them. Who cares?
Yeah. And also your gynecologist was also probably like, it's also a pretty big surgery.
I was like, just throw them out. I don't need them. She's like, well, that introduces other complications. And I was like, oh boy, okay, maybe we don't do this.
Exactly. So it's really complicated, but still exciting that the more we're learning, the more we can develop it. And actually, Dr. Swisher is on this like personal journey to rename ovarian cancer to like, I think she wants to call it like tubular ovarian or like fallopi tubular. Like she wants to like rename it something that's like, it's not just the ovaries, it's other parts too.
Oh, yeah. That's good to know.
I know. I didn't know that either. Yeah.
The Shawnee was asking if in addition to like the ovarian cancer, obviously Fred Hutch is studying so many things. Is there any specific kind of cancer research that Fred Hutch has been focusing on, sort of like as an organization we're focusing on lately, or any any projects that have a high demand for research?
Yeah. No, Shantara, that's a great question. So I mean, it's one of those things where I feel very lucky to be at a place that has so many different priorities and that invests in all of them. Like it's genuinely humbling every day that out of the 240 different labs we have, each and every one of them, I believe, could earn a Nobel Prize tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Each and every one of them, I believe, is like fundamentally beautiful. So all of them are amazing. I think the two that come to mind right now that we're really focusing on, we're actually focusing on more in response to the current funding cuts to science. So the two that come to mind for me are basic sciences. So I mentioned that we have 7 different research divisions, and one of those is our basic science division. Basic sciences are like fundamental sciences. So that's the kind of work that actually Dr. Swisher, who we were just talking about, that's the kind of work that she does. Fundamental biology, how does ovarian cancer work? What is ovarian cancer? With the understanding that the more we learn about how something works and what it is, the better we can design preventions, early detections, treatments, all those things. So that's one of the things that we're really leaning into, is supporting the scientists in that division, supporting their work, and making sure that they know that we still value them. We understand that we can't just focus on giving people the care that we have right now. We can't just say, okay, fine, we'll stop all of our research and we'll just do patient care. We still need research and we still need them. So that's one thing. The other thing that we're really working on right now is we actually just started a new sort of a new special fundraiser that we're calling the Next Gen Trainee Fund. And this is essentially a way where we are saying, hey, trainees, grad students, postdocs, people that are new to science, junior faculty, we are going to support you. We understand that it is really, really expensive to be a scientist, and we don't want you to leave. We don't want to feed into that brain drain. Like, we want to make sure that we find resources that make it possible for you to stay in science and do the work that you've been doing. Because that is something that I think scares me the most when I think about the cuts to the funding. Is the fact that there are going to be people who want to be here, who want to do the hard work of being a scientist, who want to cure cancer and infectious disease, who want to fundamentally help people, who will leave this field. And when they leave, it is very, very hard to come back. And many studies and history have shown that the people that are the most likely to be impacted are people of color and women. Folks that are underrepresented in STEM already are the most likely to be impacted, the most likely to leave, the least likely to come back. So we're going to lose them, their perspectives, their ideas, their work. So I think those are the things that come to mind for me: fundamental research and keeping our trainees and our young people in science.
Yeah. And I think it is really important for, especially for, medicine and science, is having those other perspectives. For so much of history, medicine has really only been focused on trials on men and people assigned male at birth, and generally always on white people in the West. And it's just like, okay, well, that's also led to like some misconceptions about certain health problems among, different backgrounds of people. It's just like, this is why we need, a more diverse background of people in science.
Yes. Or like, I'm sure you've heard of, I'm blanking on the name of it right now. I was trying to think of it. Is it thalidomide? It might be thalidomide. But there was an example of, I forget the exact which one it was, but there was an example of it was a drug that was being used to treat morning sickness, but they only treated it in men. So they treated this drug in men as a way to like control nausea. And then they prescribed it to women as a treatment for morning sickness during pregnancy. But because it was never tested in women, they didn't realize that it actually causes birth defects and birth differences that cause health problems for the baby. But they just hadn't thought to test that.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things that like, we need to be really thoughtful and intentional and understand that everyone's body is different, which is why we need to do clinical trials and drug trials and provide healthcare for folks of all different bodies. Because if we don't capture all the sexes and genders and identities and races and ethnicities and all the different ways of being a human, we're not going to capture anything,
Yeah.
That's another thing I do love about Fred Hutch, is that I do feel like I work at an institution that is committed to that. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Love them.
Yeah.
All right.
Next
back
slide,
to ovarian cancer. Let's look at some numbers.
Let's look at some numbers. I always include numbers because some people's brains are number brains. So I always try to include numbers for
some people.
Yeah. Some people. Yeah. You hear them say that. Some people have number brains.
Some of us are like, oh, I went to school for journalism. We had courses for like, okay, how do you like portray numbers in visual form? And I was like, that's me. I'm one of those people.
Okay, Rory Gilmer, I see you. All right. It's fall. We're celebrating. Okay. No, journalism is so cool. Two of my best friends are both journalism and anthropology majors, and I think it's so cool.
Yes.
English and history, stunning.
Yeah, Shawnee and I know.
I'm technically part of the writing team here at Fred Hutch. That's technically where I fit in with science communication. And like my entire team is like English and history majors. And I flex on everyone all the time. I'm like, I'm on the smartest team in the entire philanthropy division. Sorry, not sorry, Jackie. We're technically on different teams. But yeah, donor comms can get it. Donor comms is the smartest team. I'm the dumbest person on my team, and I'm so proud of that. But ovarian cancer, yes, numbers. So the American Cancer Society estimates for ovarian cancer in 2025 are that about 20,890 women will receive a new diagnosis of ovarian cancer, making it the 8th most common type of cancer in women. Breast and colon are more common, as well as lung. Breast, lung, and colon are the most common cancers in women. And also, as I've mentioned earlier, when I say women here, I tend to refer to women, meaning folks that are assigned female at birth, because when we talk about cancer risk, we're talking about your organ inventory. So that's sort of the language that I'll use. But again, if there's language that folks prefer, pop it in the chat, let me know, and we'll use whatever verbiage is best. Mm-hmm. We also know that about 12, also the other reason I use women when quoting stats is, quick tangent, is because the websites say women.
Yeah, I've
and I don't know. And so because they say women, I don't know exactly what they're referring to. So for the sake of accuracy, I repeat the language they've used because I'm assuming they mean women assigned female at birth, people assigned female at birth who identify as women who have, had no note of any other changes or identities in their, electronic medical record. But I'm aware that it's not a super helpful term because it's very vague. That being said, about 12,730 women will pass away from their disease, which is the 5th leading cause of cancer death. And it's important to note that discrepancy, right? 8th most common type of cancer, but 5th leading cause of cancer death. Mm-hmm. We also know that overall ovarian cancer primarily develops in older women. So about half or 50% of all women with ovarian cancer are 63 or older. It sounds like your mother might have been younger when she passed from her disease.
Yeah, because I was in college when she got her diagnosis. Yeah. So she would have been like very young 50s.
Yeah. That's hard. Yeah. So, and you can see that still happens. If half are over 63, half are under. But it is hard because then you're also not looking for it. You haven't really been warned about it, which is why talking about it is so important. Mm-hmm. We also know that ovarian cancer rates have been declining over the past few decades. Fewer women are dying of ovarian cancer, likely due to lower incidence because fewer people are being diagnosed, it's not developing as often, and there are better treatments. We'll talk a little bit about why we think it's on the decline in terms of incidence, like why are people getting it less frequently. And since 1976, a year after Fred Hutch opened its doors, we've noticed that the rates of ovarian cancer death have declined by about 43%, which is non-trivial.
Yeah. That's significant.
All right. Now we're going to get into some fun Splatoon questions.
Yeah.
Also, Jackie, you're right. We're basically on the same team. I'm always like, I'm on donor comms, but also I'm with Jackie.
Yeah.
Okay. So what influences our risk for ovarian cancer? It's also important to know that some risks can be modified and others are out of our control. Mm-hmm. I always like to say that because, again, wherever we can, let's avoid the blame game. Mm-hmm. All right. So let's do a few examples. So first one, starting simple. Who's at higher risk for ovarian cancer? Agent 3, who was assigned female at birth, or Captain Cuttlefish, who was assigned male at birth? Did I pick good characters? Are those good characters?
You did.
Okay, cool. I was going to tell you my vibe. I was like, they seem cool. I was like, Agent 3 has fun hair.
Oh my gosh, I love the braid. Oh, it's so good.
Cute.
It's so cute. I don't know. All right, chat. So, like, based on what we know, Pat, you're here for this. Based on what we know, do we think Agent 3 is more at risk for ovarian cancer, or is Captain Cuttlefish more at risk?
Agent 3 is not assigned to birth. I simply don't know.
Splatoon 3 is very Splatoon 3. Out of all the 3 Splatoon games so far, it is the first time where when you go to make your character, who is also your Agent 3 character for the single player story, is the first time they don't ask you whether you're a boy or a girl. They ask you what's your style, and they give you 2 silhouettes. And we were like, let's go.
I'm obsessed with that. Are you kidding me?
I also love the joke of okay, is your style do you have big bushy eyebrows or do you have thinner eyebrows? What's your style?
Honestly, and I love that they only give you some options though, because D&D is really stressful because I'm like, I just get to make it from scratch. I'm like, give me some limits. I love that silhouettes thing. Also, bushy eyebrows all the way. Are you kidding me? Please.
They're so good.
All right, seeing some Agent 3, assuming this Agent 3 was assigned female at birth and has ovaries. If you go to the next slide, big reveal, not surprising.
Yep.
Anyone with ovaries can go to ovarian cancer. Usually people who are assigned male at birth have a prostate. I like to shout that out because some patients on the East Coast also didn't know what a prostate was. Prostate is a gland that men have, or people who are assigned male at birth. And that gland can also get cancer. And so typically folks who are assigned male at birth are going to be recommended to be screened for prostate cancer. Typically folks who are assigned female at birth and have ovaries, we would recommend being aware of ovarian, uterine, and breast cancer risks.
Yes. And I don't remember when I glanced through your presentation if this comes up later, but I remember even I think possibly it was Jackie who brought this up to me a little while ago. I think back in May during the previous fundraising campaign for Fred Hutch about the BRCA 1 and 2, and there being like more links between ovarian and prostate cancers.
Yes, that will come up later.
We'll save it for later.
Yes. BRCA1 and BRCA2, also known as the BRCA genes, are just as a quick teaser. Changes in those genes are associated with something called hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome, or HBOC. And HBOC, depending on whether you're changing the BRCA1 gene or the BRCA2 gene, are associated with an increased risk for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, melanoma or skin cancer, and depending on your family history, pancreatic cancer. And your specific risk is going to vary depending on the change you have in the gene, which gene you have the change in, and your family history. But it can put, a person at risk for all those different kinds of cancers, depending on what organs that person still has.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Next slide. This one I think is a little more tricky.
Yeah.
So who's at high risk for ovarian cancer? Someone who has an IUD or someone who does not use hormonal birth control? I might have gotten this one wrong, to be honest. IUD is an intrauterine device, by the way.
Yes, right.
It's a form of birth control.
Yeah, that is a form of birth control. It is hormonal birth control, right?
They can be hormonal or non-hormonal. Yeah, you can have a non-hormonal form with copper, or you can have the hormonal kind. I think the hormonal kind is slightly more common.
Yeah. What do you all think, chat? I think
someone's saying Agent 8.
Yeah, because this one's interesting because hormonal birth control affects different cancers differently.
You should have seen the spiral I went on being like, but why? Because right now we're still learning a lot about the way that hormones impact our cancer risks. And so right now, a lot of our studies are saying, okay, we are very confident this is an increased risk. This is a lower risk for this cancer and this cancer. Still trying to figure out exactly why, because those hormones are so complicated. So I'll share with you our general understanding with the hope that will evolve over time. All right, if we go to the next slide for the big reveal. Yeah, so it's actually folks that don't use hormonal birth control. So people with intrauterine devices or who take oral contraceptive pills or some other form of hormonal birth control have a lower risk for ovarian cancer, sometimes up to 50% lower than their baseline risk. But, and this may have to do with how these forms of birth control limit and regulate hormone exposure to the ovaries. So greater levels of hormones are going to increase that risk. And it's funny because with breast cancer, it's the opposite, and I'll explain why. But for the ovaries, to sort of just start there, if you're having multiple menstrual cycles, regular menstrual cycles, you're constantly having a turnover of hormones, those hormone fluctuations that we think can put you at an increased risk for ovarian cancer because of those constant fluctuations. If you're on birth control, it's regulating and minimizing that hormone exposure. And so it's lowering that overall ovarian cancer risk. We also know that for that same reason, getting pregnant, particularly at younger ages, like under the age of 26, we know that getting pregnant can also lower your risk of ovarian cancer because when you're pregnant, your body is putting those cycles on pause. For the same reason, breastfeeding can lower your risk because breastfeeding also lowers overall hormone levels and hormone exposure to the ovaries. And so that can also lower your risk. So it's just interesting because ironically, even though it lowers the levels in the ovaries and in the uterus, so it can also slightly lower endometrial cancer risk because of the regular shedding of the lining. in that same, in this, for the same reasons, but opposite, it increases your breast cancer risk, as you alluded to, slightly. It very slightly increases your breast cancer risk, and it only increases that breast cancer risk while you're taking it, and only in proportion to your baseline risk. So still generally very safe. For example, if I have a baseline risk of 13% and I start taking birth control, my risk for breast cancer is going to increase slightly, probably not enough for me to notice or do extra screening young or have any significant concerns. But when I stop taking it, my body will then revert back to my original baseline risk and no longer be at elevated risk. But we think that the reason hormonal birth control puts you at an increased risk for breast cancer is because it's increasing exposure to estrogen and progesterone, hormones that can drive breast cancer. But then you're like, but those are the same hormones that I'm putting into my ovary. So how? Why? But it's because the human body is very complicated.
Oh, these hormones.
I know. And so that's why I always say the form of birth control a person chooses to use, not to use, is a personal and multifaceted decision that should be made with the support of a healthcare provider. It's also important to note that pregnancy comes with a lot of risks also. And then at the end, often you have a human, which is a big responsibility. So typically the reasons that you're going to use birth control or not use birth control are most likely for most people not going to be associated with their ovarian or breast cancer risk, although you should be aware of those factors.
Yeah. I know my mom told us even about, like, I think that was when there were starting to be more studies about, like, oh yeah, it might be a good idea for, 2 kids here in this family to be on hormonal birth control because it will, decrease their risk of ovarian cancer. And I've just been like, okay, well, I guess that's what we're doing. I mean, I was already doing it, but I guess we're continuing.
Exactly. Because there's so, and providers, especially for like young women, particularly young people with ovaries, with breasts, they're just like, I don't know, if your period's really painful, your skin's really bad, try birth control. That'll even you out, because it's safe, it's effective, it's, There are also certain drugs that can be used for folks who are at an increased risk for hereditary kinds of cancer called aromatase inhibitors. And those are another class of drug that specifically work on minimizing hormone exposure to the cells that might otherwise be targeted. So that's another form of it's called chemoprevention, which I think is a strange name, but essentially a drug that can be used to lower risks. Again, this is not the kind of thing that everyone should just take. It's the kind of thing that may be discussed with you, with your doctor, if you look like the kind of person who would benefit from that. Not everyone would, but some people do, depending on your genetics and personal history. But that's another thing that sometimes folks do.
Yeah. Always good to have that conversation with your doctor.
Yes. All right, next one, another fun one about hormones. Who's at high risk for ovarian cancer? Someone who had their first period at 11 or someone who had their first period at 17?
Oh, now this one I had never actually read anything about periods and when you would have them and how it related to having a higher risk for ovarian cancer. And so I have my own guess because I actually don't know. But
what's your guess? I want to hear it.
All right, chat. You can let me know if you agree or not. But so my thought was my knee-jerk reaction was had first period at 17 years old. If our Agent 8 character, if that were true for her, maybe she would be at a higher risk. But then I was thinking more about it, and I was thinking, I don't know if perhaps if you've had your period earlier. I'm gonna say I had mine at 11 years old. I was pretty young, and I
was 17. I was the other end of the spectrum. I was pretty old.
Man, I wish I would trade in a heartbeat.
Okay, but it's very confusing when you're like, at first you're like, this is fine, and then you're like, am I good? You're like, is it working?
Oh, yeah. I do know a lot of people who did have their first period at, close to at 11 or close to 11 years old, on the young side. And that might just be my cohort of just people, we just lucked into that statistic. But I was thinking that there's something going on with hormones there. If you're just experiencing these hormonal fluctuations earlier in life and thus having that for a longer period of time. If that's going to increase your risk.
Okay, go to the next slide, chef. We're cooking. Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, STEM brain.
All
Okay,
right.
scientist. Yeah, it's exactly that idea. And so we know that having your period earlier and going through menopause later can
Mm.
increase your chance of having ovarian and breast cancer because of that higher lifetime exposure to hormones.
Mm-hmm.
I also like to list this one because I'd like to really highlight that a lot of this is out of our control. It's good to be aware of because it just helps us be more aware of who should be having screening, who should be really thoughtful about these things. And because the more we know these things, the more it gives us insight into what's happening at a molecular cellular level. And the more we know what's happening at a molecular cellular level, the more we can design better prevention, screening, and treatment options.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is a really interesting one. And it's also something to keep in mind because we know that the rates of early menstruation, early menarche first period, are on the rise. More people are getting their periods younger these days than previously.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, just a fact. And so exploring if that's going to in any way influence cancer risks for sort of the next generation. Interesting.
Have there been any studies that have sort of tried to get at the reason for why that's sort of trending to happen earlier?
Yeah, there have been a couple different studies. I need to do more digging on it, but one theory was that it might be associated with a slightly increased rate of like adipose tissue or fat tissue in young people, because we know that oftentimes menarche is triggered by fat content, because women and people with ovaries, in order to be fertile, need to have a certain level of body fat. That's why typically most women are going to have higher body fat content than most men. Your bodies have different needs. And so that was one theory, but that doesn't seem to be holding water with everyone. For example, I'm a pretty typically sized person. My doctors were never concerned about my size, and yet they were like, still not? And I was like, still not. So it's one of those things that, that's one theory. It's a pretty straightforward one, because we do know that having that appropriate level of adipose tissue is associated with triggering menopause, or not menopause, menarche first period. But I think there's probably a lot more to it than that. Genetics is also a big factor. So another thing is like, what age did your mom, what age did your aunts get their periods? What age did your sisters get their periods? We know that a lot of it is also genetic. It might be diet. It might be environment. There's a lot of ongoing research. Yeah.
Well, that's very, very cool.
Next slide just has a nice summary of some factors that can lower our risk and some factors that are increase our risk. And again, you'll notice that a lot of these are really complicated. Some of them are in our control, some are not in our control. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that I just note it's important to note that cancer is complicated. There are many valid reasons to make different life choices. As you've just said, I'm sure your conversation with the gynecologist, like every 30 seconds, you're probably like, oh, that's what I'll do. And then she would keep talking,
like,
well, or not do. Maybe I won't do that then. And so, if you go to the next slide, I want to take a little minute to talk about inherited gene mutations, like BRCA1, BRCA2, which I mentioned earlier, Lynch syndrome, which is another hereditary cancer syndrome, because all cancer is genetic. So if you go to the next slide and then the next slide, we're just saying, like, how does cancer actually happen?
Genetics time.
Genetics time. So here are the next slide, slide 27. I always like to make sure that we're on the same footing when we talk about genetics. We have this phrase in genetic counseling where we say all cancer is genetic, but not all cancer is hereditary. That means that all cancer cells have fundamentally different DNA than healthy cells, but most people with cancer are not born with an increased risk for cancer. That develops over time. So I'm going to be using a lot of scientific language. So I like to make sure that we all use the same words. So DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, is the genetic material of the human cell. So we can think of that DNA as the big instruction manual for the human body. All of the DNA in your body, all of the DNA in a given cell, we also call the genome, the human genome. So if you go to the next slide, if DNA is that big instruction manual, then we have these chromosomes, which are like chapters in that book. And that's just because there's so much DNA in the cell. There's simply so much information that in order to make it fit in the cell, it has to get very finely packaged into these structures called chromosomes. That packaging not only makes it fit, that packaging also keeps it organized. Because in the same way that you want to read a book chapter 1 to chapter 23, our chromosomes are organized into 23 different, or our DNA is organized into 23 different chromosomes because we need that information in different orders at different times and different amounts. If you go to the next slide, we can take this analogy a little further. So we've got our DNA that's packaged into chromosomes, and then within those chromosomes, that DNA is further organized into genes. And we can think of each gene as like a sentence in that instruction manual. And most of these genes have jobs, not actually most of the genes, actually only about 2% of the genes encode proteins that do a lot of jobs. Mm-hmm. But these genes have different functions. And as in any book, some sentences are more important than others. Some genes are more important than others. And so if you go to that fourth slide, you'll see that we get to the proteins. I mentioned that only about 2% of all of the human genome actually encodes a protein. And the proteins are really, really important. Those are like the workhorses of the cell. Each protein has a special job in the body. So a little quick summary, your body is made up of cells. All of your cells contain DNA. That DNA is organized into chromosomes. Those chromosomes are made up of genes. Each gene has a special job. Some of the most important genes encode proteins. Proteins, workhorses of the cell that get things done. Yes, proteins working for those gains.
They're working hard.
Working hard. If you go to the next slide, I've got a question. People are born with a special set of genes called tumor suppressors. Can you guess what tumor suppressors do?
My first guess is that they suppress tumors.
Fallout. Let's go. Absolutely, yes. Next slide, Chef.
Sometimes
Next slide.
Things are named appropriately sometimes.
Yep. Tumor suppressors help our cells repair their DNA and prevent tumor growth. The reason that repairing your DNA is important is that we can think of these tumor suppressors as like spell check. Because if we've got our big instruction manual, we want that instruction manual to work well. We want that instruction manual, every time a cell grows and divides, they have to replicate all their DNA. They have to make sure that this new cell also has a copy of the instruction manual. What happens in cancer is sometimes that DNA gets damaged, and those typos change the language, and that instruction manual no longer encodes a healthy cell. Now the instruction manual is encoding a cancer cell. And so your tumor suppressors act like spell check. They go through and they say, oh, I do not like that typo. That changes the meaning of that sentence. And they fix it. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that people usually inherit 2 copies of each tumor suppressor. You get one from the egg or your biological mom and one from the sperm or biological dad. So that's why we have our chromosomes in pairs as well, because we get one from the egg, one from the sperm, 2 of each. Mm-hmm. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that usually both copies of the gene work and help to protect our body from cancer. They might be slightly different because your parents are slightly different, but they both work. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see that sometimes genes get damaged or mutated and stop working. And so if genes are like sentences, then genetic mutations are like typos that change the meaning of those sentences. And in the instruction manual of our bodies, the instruction manual is pretty specific. We do not tolerate typos well.
You're speaking my language. This is my work. This is my there was a typo here. Well, or at least I think this was a typo because this doesn't make sense anymore. Yes, this is a full sentence, but I don't think this is what was meant.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yep. So if you go to the next slide, this is usually the question that follows. People go, well, how do they get mutations? Genes can get mutations a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's environmental exposures. So we know that UV light, tobacco smoke, radiation, alcohol, all of these things are what we call carcinogenic or cancer causing. Mm-hmm. And they're cancer causing because they can cause DNA damage. And if that DNA damage doesn't get repaired, if that DNA damage builds up over time, if your instruction manual gets full of typos, then suddenly you've got a cancer cell in your hands as opposed to a healthy cell. Sometimes, though, it's not environmental exposures. Sometimes it's just errors in cell growth and division, these genetic typos that just happen. Sometimes as your cell is replicating its DNA, it makes a mistake. That happens. Now, our tumor suppressors are there to fix those mistakes. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see that sometimes you can get mutations in the spell check. So what happens if your spell check isn't working? You're going to get more typos. But luckily, if one copy stops working, you've got a backup. It's one of the benefits of having 2 biological parents. But if a person loses both copies of tumor suppressor, on the next slide, slide 38, and then the next slide, then cancer can develop.
So does this really only happen when you lose, both of those copies?
Yes. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see this is a picture from an actual cancer cell. So on the right, we have a normal or a typical cell. We've got 23 pairs of chromosomes. You'll see down at the bottom, this was likely taken from a person who was assigned male at birth, a genetic male. There's so many different words because you've got an X and a Y chromosome. Typically, folks that are assigned female at birth and identify as femme have two X chromosomes. But this normal cell, so cute. It's in pairs. They look great. We love to see it. They're all one color because they're all one kind of chromosome. Then you look at the tumor cell. This is a tumor cell where both copies of that tumor suppressor, usually multiple tumor suppressors, have been knocked out. And because you've lost your spell check, suddenly every time the DNA gets damaged, which happens frequently, we're exposed to a lot of things, suddenly they're all going to accumulate. They're not going to get fixed. And then these changes are going to build up. You see here that we don't have any copies of chromosome 2. We have no copies of chromosome 15. We have no copy of the Y. That's gone missing. We've got 4 copies of 10 and 17, 3 of 12, 3 of 6, 3 of 13. And then on the bottom, you see all those marker chromosomes. All of those marker chromosomes are combinations of different chromosomes that have gotten smushed together in ways they're not supposed to be.
So that's what that is.
So you see under there, it says fragment sources. So like the first one is 2 plus something we don't know about, or just a lot of extra 2. The one next to that has pieces of 8, 12, and 2 all smushed together. And so what happens when you have these chromosomes that get rearranged and combined in different ways is that suddenly the genes are also getting smushed together and they're making proteins that you don't usually see. They're making what we call fusion proteins. And some of these fusion proteins behave in ways that make those cells cancerous. And so those cancerous behaviors include growing and dividing more rapidly than usual, metabolizing at a faster rate, escaping the immune system, because your immune system is usually trained to detect a cancer cell. Your immune system's like, that does not look okay. And your immune system is going to tag that for destruction, destroy it, wipe it out. But what happens is that your cancer cells evolve because they grow and divide so rapidly. And because their genome is so unstable, every time they grow and divide, they're also changing. So when we say a tumor, we actually mean a collection of really heterogeneous, diverse cancer cells. They're not all like one another. They're all full of typos, but they're all full of slightly different typos. So
and that's hard to necessarily find and deal with because it is varied.
Yes. It makes it really hard to treat, like you're saying. Because let's say we have a treatment that is really targeted for this one kind of cancer cell, but your tumor contains that kind of cancer cell, but also 3 other kinds of cancer cells. If we're not able to kill all of them, we're not doing our job because it'll just come back, you know? Now, most of the time, to go to the next slide, most of the time people have what we call sporadic cancer. So this is when a person is born with 2 working copies of their tumor suppressor genes, but over time, life happens, mutations build up, they lose both copies of the tumor mutation, they're out of spell check, typos build up, the DNA gets damaged, cancer develops. That accounts for about 70% of all cancer diagnoses. Much more rare, if you go to the next slide, is hereditary cancer. And this is when a person is born with only 1 copy of a tumor suppressor gene. And that accounts for about 5 to 10% of all cancer diagnoses. If you go to the next slide, you'll notice that hereditary cancer usually runs in families. And this is because, I'll use myself as an example because that's easy. Let's say I have a hereditary cancer syndrome. That means that I have 1 copy that works and 1 copy that doesn't work. Most likely, I inherited the copy that doesn't work from one of my parents. And then when I go to make eggs, because I have ovaries, when I go to make eggs, half of my eggs will get this copy and half of my eggs will get this copy. And that's because your eggs only have half of your DNA, because eventually the biological goal, biology doesn't care, doesn't want anything, but it would meet sperm and the sperm would bring the other half. Right. So now the fetus has 1 whole collection. That's a common question. People are like, why do my eggs only have half? And it's like, well, they're waiting for the other half. But that means that
it's a teamwork game here.
Partnership. But it's how we maintain our diversity.
Yes.
But that means that 50% of my eggs have a copy that doesn't work, which means that each time I were to get pregnant, there would be a 50-50 chance if that pregnancy would inherit the working copy or the not working copy. Or statistically speaking, we would expect about half of my live births, half of the children that were born, to have the not working copy and half to have the working copy. Any questions about that? And or did your gynecologist ever talk about it differently? I'm always curious how other people talk about it.
This did not come up at all. I mean, makes sense. Obviously, a lot of things. I mean, any of us who've done like, I don't know, going back to middle school science class, we like first learn like the teeny little bit of genes and whatnot, and passing down of genes. We all did like the squares and whatnot.
Punnett squares. I love a Punnett square.
Yes,
I love a Punnett square.
In middle school.
Oh, and the more complicated the Punnett square, the better. That just like scratches an itch in my brain. I'm like, give me 8 traits. Let me make an obscenely large box.
And so it's, of course, you're passing certain things down. We have recessive genes and whatnot. Obviously, there are certain reasons. There are reasons why, there are traits associated with certain people. Obviously, red hair is not one of the common hair colors you see. It's often like that is much more recessive and various things like that. So genes are interesting.
Yeah. Genes are wild. And that's a good lead in to the next slide, where I talk about some of the genes involved in hereditary conditions with an increased risk for ovarian cancer. So you've got these genes, and if you go to the next slide, because I love to do animations. We'll note that BRCA1 and BRCA2, which you've already talked about, up to 1 in 4 or 25% of ovarian cancers are part of hereditary cancer syndromes resulting from inherited changes and mutations in certain genes. And about 13 to 50% of those are BRCA1 and BRCA2. So they're the most common genes mutated in ovarian cancer. Mm-hmm. You'll note that there's a discrepancy there, that only about 5 to 10% of all cancer diagnoses are hereditary, but 25% of ovarian cancers. And that's because ovarian cancer is a more rare kind of cancer. Breast cancer is more common. So if someone gets breast cancer, we're like, that's a pretty common cancer. That could have just happened. Mm-hmm. But ovarian cancer, we're like, well, 75% of the time, this just happens. This is sporadic. But it's more likely that there's something genetic going on. So it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing to look out for. So it seems like I should maybe talk to my doctor and be like, okay, well, if I have one parent with ovarian cancer and I have one parent with prostate cancer, and I also have some of these other possibly more at risk, background things for myself, is it worth going to genetic counseling and seeing about BRCA1 and 2, especially when I think, if I remember correctly, my mom did get tested for. Okay. And good. we understood so little of this, especially back then, because this would have been like around 2010. Yeah. But I remember she said she just got tested for like some genetic cancer thing, and that it came up negative. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I don't know what that is, but cool.
No, that happens a lot. Patients are often like, I'm pretty sure they had some kind of testing. And we're like,
I don't know what.
The paperwork would be helpful. Yes. But it's because we didn't talk about it. And also many of us just trust our doctors. Mm-hmm. And like, you're so overwhelmed and you're so stressed. Your doctor's like, it came back negative. We're moving on. You're like, okay. Like, you're not going to be like, can I get a copy of that? You know, like, we trust our doctors. Like, I like, now I'm kind of a freak. Now I'm the annoying patient who's like, may I have a copy? But before, I was not that person. I was like, sure, okay. All right. You say my thyroid's weird? My thyroid's weird. Now I'm like, I would like to see the blood work.
I would like to have a copy for my records so I can consult this later.
I'm like, I still trust you. I'm still very obedient. I just want a record. Yes. Yes, but no, I'm glad to talk about sort of doing this testing, talking about it, because that's what the next section is on.
Yeah.
Rose of Battle, I'm obsessed. So the question people always ask is like, how do I know if I'm at risk? Because everyone immediately starts thinking about their own personal history. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the next slide, this is just an example, but there are red flags. So if or when you meet with a genetic counselor, for anyone who decides to do that, you'll chat with them and you'll notice they're going to ask a lot of questions about your personal history and your family history. And that's because we're looking for these red flags. And the reason we do that is that we can offer you, oh, thank you, Jackie. Mm-hmm. I checked, don't worry. There's a backup bus. That's why I said 6, because I knew I would be bad. My backup bus is 6:30. The backup bus is 6:30, Jackie. Thank you. Yeah, I was like, I'll give myself the second to last bus. But breast cancer, unless you have to go, Roosevelt.
No, I'm good.
Okay. But the reason that we check for these red flags is because we're going to offer genetic testing regardless. But we know that insurance is going to cover it if you meet certain criteria.
Right.
And these are the criteria that will allow insurance to cover it. And these are also the reasons that we want to be, responsible with your time, with your money, with your energy, with these resources. So red flags include a young age at diagnosis. So typically we're thinking someone under the age of 50. Family history of cancer. So if we see certain patterns of cancer, as we said, BRCA1, BRCA2, it's not just breast cancer, it's breast, ovarian, prostate, melanoma, and pancreatic. So if I see someone who's like, well, my mom had breast cancer at 30, so breast cancer young age, and her sister had breast cancer at 32, and her aunt had ovarian cancer, and their brother had prostate cancer, I'm seeing a lot of cancer. I'm seeing more rare cancers, and I'm seeing these cancers that cluster together all in one family. The other thing that we keep an eye out for is ancestry. So the reason Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry is on here is that we know that folks with Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry are more likely to have changes in BRCA1 and BRCA2 than folks who don't have that ethnic background. We also know that if you have a personal history of multiple primary cancers, so if I had breast cancer and then later I have ovarian cancer, that also suggests there might be something going on in my entire body. Because again, if you're born with an inherited risk, that's something that affects every cell in your body, as opposed to something that happens over time, which might only affect the cells that mutation occurred in. And then also certain kinds of breast cancer are more associated with hereditary breast and ovarian cancer syndrome. So triple negative, meaning that none of the hormone receptors are involved. If it's in both breasts, if it's male breast cancer, so a person who has a much lower amount of breast tissue, all of those are going to be flags as well. The other thing that we keep an eye out for, in the same way we look for patterns of different kinds of cancer, we also look for different generations. So if I see that someone's grandmother had cancer and their mom had cancer and their sister had cancer, that's 3 generations, which suggests it might be something that's passing through the family.
Right. And that's all on like one side of your family.
All on one side, exactly. Because sometimes people say like, oh, my mom had breast cancer and my aunt had breast cancer. I'll go, was that your mother's sister or your dad's sister?
Yeah.
Because that also matters. An important thing to note is that some people are adopted and don't know about their biological family, and or some people just have really small families. And so they're like, I've got one mom, I've got one dad. That's what I've got. We can still offer genetic testing. Like we're still going to offer you genetic testing. Like you can still have the testing. These are just some red flags that can help us learn more information, even in the absence of testing. Sometimes folks can choose to get earlier, more screening just based on family history without testing. But if you go to the next slide, you'll notice my little shout out that folks who have suspected hereditary breast cancer or ovarian cancer or any kind of hereditary cancer syndrome should be offered genetic testing. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that someone who could be good at doing that is a genetic counselor. Obviously, I'm biased. That's my degree. But genetic counselors are trained in both medical genetics and counseling to help patients, their families, and other providers navigate the world of hereditary cancer syndromes and genetic testing. The reason meeting with a genetic counselor instead of your PCP can be helpful is that genetic counselors and geneticists are trained exclusively and deeply in genetics that affect healthcare. So they're going to order the right kinds of tests, they're going to order comprehensive tests, and they're going to talk to you about what it means. And most of the time, a genetic counseling appointment is an hour, and it's an hour dedicated exclusively to talking about all of this, to ordering the testing, to asking you what kind of testing you want, to talking about the best ways for you to receive those results. What the next steps might look like. And having a full hour to do this is often something patients really enjoy because so often in healthcare, you have like 15 minutes to go through your entire life story.
Yeah.
Because that always happens. They're like, so tell me everything about you. Go. And I'm like, I
don't remember everything.
And I'm an oversharer at the doctor. At the doctor, I'm a comical oversharer. They're like, are you taking any medications? I'm like, a daily multivitamin, but sometimes I forget. They're like, okay, I don't care about that.
I don't care about your multivitamin.
No, I'm like, I take it in the morning with food. They're like, I don't care how you're taking your vitamin. I'm like, here's the brand. I brought it with me. They're like, once again, that's not what we meant. And I'm like, one time I took Advil in middle school. They're like, okay, once again, I don't care. That's a normal medication. You're fine. Yeah. No, I'm way too much of an overshare. Yeah. I bring lists. I'm like, here's everything that's ever happened to me.
Yes.
Enjoy that rabies vaccine. I was bit by a raccoon. If you're good, I'll tell you the story. Yeah. No, it's so funny.
Yeah, I've now started actually keeping a list of medications on my phone. Because when my dentist asked for my medications recently, because he was just like,
dentists.
yeah, he was like, you've been flossing. I can tell you've been flossing, but your gums are still a little bit inflamed. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. And then he was just like, what medications are you on? Because that could affect that. And I was like, oh, all right, hold on. I had to like remember.
Being at the dentist is such a strange experiment because, like,
Yes.
I feel like I'm being graded by my doctor. Like, I'm always like, am I doing a good job at having teeth? Like, I'm like, did I do good?
I'm glad you get a good grade at the dentist. A totally normal thing to want and totally possible to achieve.
Yes, exactly. Yes, agreed completely. Yeah. Also, I've always felt neutral about my doctors. I'm obsessed with my dentist. My dentist always gasses me up. He's always like, great teeth, great teeth. I'm like, thanks. Thanks. I do floss.
Yeah,
He's also
I do.
I'm also like one of the last people who ever didn't get braces because they were like, they're like, teeth are good enough for eating. And I'm like, all right, cool. And I'm like one of the last people in the world. And I remember one time my dentist was out. And so we had like a substitute dentist. And she was like, do you want braces? She's like, you don't need them, but you could have them if you wanted. And I went, as an adult who doesn't need them? I was like, I simply don't mind. When my dentist came back, I was like, she offered me braces. He went, for you? Never. I was like, thank you. Me and my good for eating teeth. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, and just because it came up in chat.
Yes.
So we were talking about vitamins. I know I take vitamin D daily because my my PCP one day was just like, yeah, I just recommend everybody in New York City to take a vitamin D supplement every day because none of us are outside enough. Is that like
so true? Yeah,
generally I've heard like vitamin D is generally a good thing to make sure you're getting enough of in general. Just like, I mean, it's good for your health in general, not just for, I think, for cancer related things. Like, are there other like good vitamins to be like making sure that we're on top of?
Yes. So I just popped in the chat a Hutch news story from Fred Hutch about the ABCs of vitamin D, what you need to know. And yes, there was another study. Let me find it. So there are certain vitamins that can be helpful for cancer risk. And there was this one study that they did on multivitamins and like a cocoa supplement because people were like, is it good for you? Is it not good for you? And essentially what they found is that multivitamins didn't significantly lower the risk for heart disease, but they did help cognitive function. So they're like, multivitamins don't seem to hurt you in any way, and they could help with cognitive function long-term in health. So worth taking. And then I forget what they found about cocoa, which means if I forgot it, it means it wasn't super exciting. But this was a study that was done at Fred Hutch through our Women's Health Initiative. The Women's Health Initiative started at Fred Hutch years ago, but it was one of the first of its kind that was committed to studying women, and specifically women who were perimenopausal, around the age of menopause, a historically understudied group. And they were specifically looking at cancer, heart disease, and osteoporosis, or the weakening of your bone density, because those are three things that affect that population and are understudied. So really, really cool study. In general, yes, it is important that your body has a diversity of vitamins. A lot of that has to do with your diet, though. So that's another thing that every dietitian at Fred Hutch will tell you is that for cancer or general health, for really any kind of condition, getting your vitamins from food is better than getting your vitamins from a supplement. And that's because when you get them in food, your body is actually better able to absorb the nutrients, which seems a little counterproductive. You think like, well, in a vitamin, it's like straight up, it's direct. You think that would be better? But actually, our body gets it better from food because a lot of times what happens is it has to be broken down by your microbiome, by all of your lovely gut friends. Anyone who was with science last night will know about that. But our lovely gut friends, the bacteria, fungi, viruses that live in and on us, they actually break down the food. And when they break it down, they release all of those nutrients, and they also turn some of them into additional helpful nutrients that help us process and absorb them better, slower, and more effectively. So taking a multivitamin should be like, I consider taking a multivitamin as like my backup for the days that like I'm not great with my diet, because like, please, we're all people out here.
Yeah. So
some days we're not great.
Some days just too busy. You got too many other things going on.
Exactly. So for the days that my breakfast is Pop-Tarts instead of my Greek yogurt and granola, then I'm like, I've got a multivitamin. It's a little backup. Today was a bad day. But
Mhm.
most of the time we should be prioritized. Not a bad day. Today was a great day. I love Pop-Tarts.
Yes.
Because I'm trying to be a responsible adult, I haven't had Pop-Tarts in like years, but I freaking love Pop-Tarts.
They're
I have
so
free will. I
good.
should buy them. Brown sugar
They're
cinnamon.
A little treat to have occasionally.
What's your favorite kind of Pop-Tart?
Oh, they're actually we're at the perfect time of year for it because they do like a limited time, like a pumpkin one, like a pumpkin spice one. I think it's just pumpkin pie flavor.
I bet that's
Pop
good.
Tart, and it's so good.
I bet that's great. I love Pop-Tarts. But yes, no, let me see if I can find, we have, at Fred Hutch, we actually have Cook for Your Life. Cook for Your Life is a great
Ooh.
resource. One of the other reasons I love this resource is that at the top of the page, you can toggle. And so it's able to be translated entirely into Spanish, like the whole website, which is awesome. So you can select your preferred language, English or Spanish. And this is a website where we share recipes that can help different kinds of diets. So prevention, treatment, survivorship, gluten-free, dairy-free, vegan, whatever your body needs, we can help you find different ways to support that. And also it helps you connect with registered dietitians who can help you figure out what's best for you. There's this whole section, Cooking 101,
Ooh.
food myths, healthy habits. So that's really cool because you can kind of read about what you need.
That is really awesome because I'm always like, it sure would be nice to meet with a nutritionist, but that costs money.
Actually, so in Washington State, meeting with a registered dietitian is 100% covered by your insurance because it's considered prevention.
That's
so there's
so
not
cool.
even a copay, and they can do virtual. So you should check and see what the laws are in New York, but it might be entirely free and with virtual telehealth options.
I'll have to double check. Okay, everybody who's also elsewhere in other states, you should go double check your state laws for insurance and whatnot.
One of my big hot takes is that everyone should meet with a registered dietitian. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. It's just another kind of healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you go to the next slide, going back to my form of healthcare, genetics, you'll notice that I have this little cautionary thing about direct-to-consumer testing. And that's because direct-to-consumer testing is things like 23andMe, Ancestry.com. Send it. If you want to learn about your ancestry, family history, fun facts, maybe be thoughtful about what you might find out. But great, do that. But in terms of actually trying to learn about your cancer risks, I would practice a lot of caution because these are not clinical tests. And that, what I mean by that is that the kinds of tests they're doing are actually different on the technological level. So an example for BRCA1 is that for BRCA1, if you go to a doctor and you say, hey, I would like to be, do my genetic testing for hereditary cancer syndromes, they'll do breast cancer genes and they'll talk to you about how big of a panel you want. Panel refers to a collection of genes. So how many genes do you want me to look at? What genes do you want me to look at? How should I look at them? And then what they'll do is they'll actually sequence those genes. So they'll look at every single letter in that gene. If we think of it as a sentence, they're going to read the entire sentence start to finish. Look for any typos. Direct consumer testing is going to say, okay, cool, yeah, we can look at breast cancer. And they're going to look at BRCA1 and BRCA2, just those two genes. And then they're just going to do like Control F for the most common typos. So they're going to look for like the 4 or 5 most common mutations, but they're not going to look at all of them. So getting a negative test is still encouraging. It means you were negative for those mutations, but it hasn't been comprehensive enough to fully rule out or identify your actual risk.
Right.
So that's why I sort of say, like, be a little cautious. Also, if you have your genetic testing ordered through a healthcare provider, then those results go immediately into your electronic medical record. So they're documented for you. Whereas if you get them direct to consumer, they're not necessarily documented anywhere. And the way that they are stored on their database may or may not be the same level of secure as a hospital system.
No, that is very true. Yeah. They don't have to be as secure with their data.
Yeah. I'm not a lot of people who are in genetics and healthcare are like direct consumer haters. I'm not a DTC hater. I think that people should be able to do whatever they want with their information. It's your choice. But in terms of using it to make healthcare decisions, I do say practice caution.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So our next few slides, just to wrap us up, little action items and takeaway. So how can we lower our cancer risks? First of all, knowing your family history. So talking to your doctor, talking to a genetic counselor. For folks who are interested in learning about genetic counseling, you can go to, let me share this link. Let me find the link. Let me copy and paste. You can go to nsgc.com. That's the National Society of Genetic Counselors. And you can search by zip code for a genetic counselor. Genetic counseling should be covered by insurance in most of your areas, but you can also always call and ask, or call and ask your insurance, like, what do folks cover? Great to be upfront about that. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing you can do. Talk to a genetic counselor, talk to your doctor, talk to your PCP, talk to someone, and they can help you find someone as well. The next thing you can do, to go to the next slide, is living a healthy lifestyle. Again, some things are out of our control, but some things are in our control, and that's great. So eating a healthy diet, particularly a diet high in fiber. The reason fiber is great is that fiber feeds your microbiome and supports the downstream chemical pathways that are anti-inflammatory. And we know that inflammation is associated with an increased risk for cancer. Mm-hmm. So eating plant-based diets high in fiber has been shown to lower cancer risks. If you get a little movement in your day, we know that that's great because it helps you maintain a healthy body weight. And we know that maintaining a healthy body weight helps cardiovascular function and lowers your cancer risk. I always say healthy body weight with the little note, again, that everyone's body looks different. Mm-hmm. Health looks different on every body. I don't care what you look like. What matters is that you are healthy, and that looks and feels different for every single person and every single body. Also, limiting alcohol and red meat consumption. So we know that alcohol can cause cancer. So typically the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, NCCN guidelines say less than 1 drink per day for women, less than 2 drinks per day for men on average, and limiting red meat consumption. We know that red meat is associated with increased risk for colon cancer. I think the current recommendation is to consume less than like 11 ounces of red meat per week, something like that. Has been shown to reduce colon cancer risk. And then to reduce your risk for skin cancer, that good sunscreen.
Oh, yeah.
All pretty straightforward. Something that a dietitian said to me that I really liked was that you should try and eat a healthy diet and live a healthy lifestyle 4 to 6 days per week. Mm-hmm. Ideally, you get 7, but we're not perfect, so don't stress. So they said 4 to 6 days per week. And I really loved that.
Yeah, like so don't stress yourself out not being perfect.
Don't. Because also, like, you don't want to be that annoying person on Thanksgiving who's like, don't worry, I'll be over here with my brand. You all enjoy. And
it's like, no, enjoy today.
Because the other thing, community. Like, studies have shown that having community extends the health span so much. Mm-hmm. Like, it's so important.
And food and community are very intertwined.
Yes. Yeah. My sister and I are literally planning a Soup-tember party where everyone brings a soup.
That's amazing.
I'm excited. Next slide. We talked about this a little bit before with HPV, but keeping up to date on your vaccines. Next slide. Keeping up to date on your screenings, mammograms, colonoscopies, skin checks. And then the very last one, talking about it. Again, it used to be so taboo, but we know that if we talk about it, it becomes less scary and allows us to build community. And it allows everyone to engage in scientific dialogue. And that's so important because you don't know where the ideas that are going to spark the next cure are going to come from. It's not necessarily from a scientist, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last couple slides, this next one is just get involved, ways to get involved. Hutch News might be actually really fun for this group. Mm-hmm. I will copy that link and pop that in the chat. Hutch News is basically just like science articles from Fred Hutch. We also do something called Science Spotlights, which are about research, but they're written, by our writers, by our writing team, for everyone like us. You can join our Discord. And then if you go to the next slide, this really is the last slide, I promise.
Yes.
I'll catch my bus and I'll let you get on with your evening.
Yeah, I've got ads that will run soon, so I don't want to make sure that you get to say goodbye before they run.
But this is coming and saying hi. So if anyone's local, these are some different events that we do. I'll be at every single one of these, but these are just like community stuff. So your folks in Vancouver, your people, anyone who's local, or if y'all ever want to fly out and come visit us, let us know.
Yeah.
But that's it. Okay. Thanks for letting me run long yapping with you.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here with us, Helen. We appreciate you so much. We're going to let you go catch your bus.
Catching my bus because I'm an adult. I take the bus. All right. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you for all you do for Fred Hutch. Have good days.
You
guys.
too.
Bye.
Thank you.